So my style is, I think we've all got in the habit of sort of listening to something while doing 3 or 4 other things at the same time. But if you really want to take great value from this webinar, I'd really recommend old school, getting a pen and paper handy. And at certain times, I'll be asking you to write some things down. So if you really want to get the most out of your investment of your time, I'd really recommend that you do that, because that's where my work becomes invaluable. It's not just about giving you information, it's about giving you a space and to really think about yourself. So that's important too. So to kick off with that, before we get stuck into the subject of resilience, I want you to think about, how have you grown as a person over the last year and a half? It's been a bit strange, still is very strange. A lot of my work, I see people one-on-one, a lot of entrepreneurs, and a lot of people who are looking now to create more from their life because they've had a bit of time to understand and assess what's important to them. So I want you to think about how you grew as a person over the last year and a half. What have you learned about yourself? What have you overcome? Just give that some thought. So I want you to think, one way I grew was, and it can be easy just to come up with a blank spot. Sometimes when we look at ourselves and we ask ourselves a question, sometimes we get sort of a blank in our minds, and so we don't come back to look at that challenge. We just go and make ourselves busy with something else. So if your mind's just gone blank, I want you to notice, that's interesting, I've just gone blank. I wonder what it was about that question that I find difficult. So what is some of the ways that you have grown as a person or grown as a business over the last year and a half, since we've all had to learn to be quite responsive? So just give that some thought, and if you're playing full out with me today, then maybe you can just write down some notes as you go. I highly recommend that you do that. So the next thing I want you to do is have a think about, who do you think of as a resilient person? So before we get into the subject of resilience, when you think of someone who's resilient, which again, as Warren said, is a buzzword that's been, flying around, who do you think of when you think of as a resilient person? Is it a superhero from a movie? Is it someone you know? Perhaps it's an old boss. Perhaps it's someone in politics. Perhaps it's not someone in politics. Perhaps it's somebody that you read about or you've seen on TV. You don't have to actually know them, but who do you think of when you think of someone who's resilient? For me, my standout person is a girl called Malala. And she is the girl that was shot in the head by the Taliban for advocating education for girls and women. And I don't know if you know much about her, but a lot of she was already passionate about educating girls in a country where the stakes were really high for engaging in education. The Taliban was shutting down all the schools. Her father was a teacher, so some of her inspiration came from her father, who encouraged her to encourage women to be educated. And so she was already in fear of her life by the time she was then found by the Taliban and shot in the head. So the passion was already there, the purpose was already there. And obviously she nearly died for that. But did that stop her? No. It's so purpose-driven for her that, on recovery, she was airlifted to the UK, where our hospitals helped her to overcome her surgeries. And even then she wouldn't be silenced, and she then has taken up lots of campaigns. She won the Nobel Peace Prize, and went on to then get formal education, I think at Oxford, where she's just completing now. So she is really someone I think of as being resilient. Second comes to mind is a client of mine who's a para-equestrian rider, and she has cerebral palsy down one side of her arm and is partially sighted, and yet she gets on massive horses and competes on them, even though she can't really see where she's going. And even just getting to the horse and getting to do her sport is a challenge. I mean, even just getting up and getting the normal things done, like putting on your clothes, is a much bigger challenge for her, due to her issues on her left side of her body. So watching her determination to get to do her sport I find really, really inspiring. So I hope that gets you thinking a little bit about who you find resilient. And I was wondering if if you want to put something in the chat box about that, then feel free to do that. And as Warren said, we'll take your questions as we go along. I don't know, Warren, have you got any thoughts on who you think of as a resilient person?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, isn't it? I suppose you could pick lots of names, can you? I think over the last 18 months, you'd look at perhaps some of those business leaders, both locally and nationally, and perhaps in some of those sectors that have been adversely affected and that they've just battled through and continue. I don't think you'd also have to, perhaps not so much now, but if you think about the height of the pandemic, you think about some of the politicians and loathe him or love him, and probably splits opinion. But you look at Boris and everything that he had going on, sort of trying to lead the country, I suppose, and having a new baby and then catching COVID, and showed some resilience there. But I always think it's when you see people in grief sometimes, and they pick themselves up and they get on with sort of everyday life and try and get back to some form of normality. That usually shows in everyday kind of life some resilience. But yeah, there'll be some examples I'd probably think about, Becki.
Yeah, no, there's some really, and I really like your example of someone who's grieving. Yeah, they're still taking care of others, they're still having to perhaps run their business whilst dealing with their own deep pain. I think that's a really good example. Thank you. And some of those qualities, I think, sometimes is someone having a stronger purpose in life, that there's something that's really important. And normally when it's other people that are more important, that tends to be quite a driving force, I find, within resilient people. Thank you for that. So hopefully that's just started to get you thinking a little bit more about who you've catalogued subconsciously to do with when you think of someone's resilient. Because when we think of somebody else being resilient, who thought of themselves? Right. Yet, most people don't think of themselves as resilient persons. So we're stuck a little bit with this blind spot that we measure ourselves against other resilient people. And we don't really stop to look at ourselves. So this is the purpose of our webinar today, is to actually look at your own sense of resilience. Now, for some of you, looking at yourself is going to be like a breath of fresh air. For some, it's going to be a bit challenging. And if it is challenging, I want you to just stick with it, okay? And just look at what you can learn from this. So let's roll up our sleeves a little bit more and get stuck in this. So I think one of the things that gets in our way on being resilient is that we have a big issue. And that big issue is that we've been given a belief that in order to be happy, our life has to be problem-free. For some of you, you might just have had a penny drop moment. I'm going to repeat that. In order to be happy, we think that our life has to be problem-free. So we're running a script that says, when I get here, everything will be fine. Or when I get here, or when I do this, or when I move house, or when my business gets to this, or in the next quarter. And so we actually stop being resourceful at that point. Because happiness is not a condition of life being problem-free. And I see this as a massive issue in the age group of 15 to late 20s, because they really, really have been sold this belief system. And so if something is wrong, it means there's something wrong with them. And they're not being prepared to deal with challenges, and therefore they're not building the resilience and the understanding that life comes with a lot of challenges and a lot of problems, and we've just got to discover our own resources and better ways with dealing with challenges. So the other part that comes into that is that we're also learning through pain, not through joy. And so therefore, if we pay attention to pain, you know, we only change when something is hurting us. When we're in enough pain, then we make some different decisions, right? We go on the diet when we feel enough shame about ourselves. We take care of our finances when we become really afraid and shamed of perhaps our spending habits. So we only pay attention to pain. So therefore life says, well, you're only paying attention to pain. I need you to give you more pain to help you learn. But we can learn the same lessons in life through joy as we can through pain. Which one would you choose? This was a revelation for me, because definitely pain and life getting my attention to change and evolve has been through pain formerly. And then I suddenly realized, hang on, I can learn from joy, from following what it is that I feel passionate about. And life starts to change. Because what we've been trained at school, all of us, and very few people have escaped this, is we've been trained with another belief system that gets in our way, which is that there are only two positions to be in life, right? And one is success and the elbow is failure. So you either are in this place of success or you are in the elbow of failure. And we filter all our experiences through success or failure. Think about it now. When we measure our performance, our business, what we're doing, we're either successful or we're a failure. And very often we've got these weird tape measures that we all use, and we're always at the bottom of the tape measure and somebody else is always at the top. Oh, they're so much more successful than me. They're so much more attractive. They're so much more charismatic. They're so much more confident than me. But we're measuring with these funny measuring sticks, and we're always measuring our own internal experiences against what we see someone presenting externally, right? So we're judging ourselves through being a success or being a failure. And therefore, we're disempowering ourselves an awful lot of the time when we're just judging ourselves with these two positions. And just judging ourselves from those two positions creates a lot of self-sabotage, and it also stops us starting things. You know, how many people, especially as we get older, we don't like being a beginner in things again because it feels vulnerable, right? So we think, well, I'm not very good at this, but we're forgetting that we've only done it 5 times. And as we get older in life, we're used to doing the things in our comfort zone. We're not used to being learners again and the vulnerability that comes with being a learner again. So we misinterpret that as us being a failure. You know, lots of people, when they start up businesses, it's hard work, right? It is hard work to get that energy, to get that boulder moving down the hill and gaining momentum, and then building the infrastructure around it to support it. You know, think about that first customer that you ever got. In that moment, you were like, oh my God, I've got my first sale, or my first customer, or my first contract, whatever it is. And remember how good that felt. Do you still feel that now every time you get a customer? So what changed? We're in the pursuit of the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So I want you to think about where you're judging yourself as success or failure, and also other people around us we're judging as successful or a failure. Because this just shuts down our vision and it stops us being resilient, because we only have 2 positions. It gives us a massive blind spot. And what I do know is that when we pay attention to well-being, productivity goes up. I mean, there's various experiments, the Norwegian 4-day working week, etc., etc. And it's really showing that when we do take care of our people, that the productivity goes up. And well-being, I mean, well-being and productivity are massive. I've had many a very successful entrepreneur who's been, you know, sacrificed 20 years of sleep, 20 years of life, and developing other areas of their lives too, like their relationships, only to come out with the big pay packet. They sold their business, and you know what? They can't understand why they're depressed. And that is because they realize at that point that they've been chasing success without fulfillment. So think about where you in your life may be chasing success, but not necessarily fulfillment. And that really means that we've lost connection to what's important to us. And what's important to us is key in our healthy motivation system and where we put our energy. Another block we have in our development is making behavioral change. You know, we've all got to different degrees issues with the word change, because we attribute change as being something that's being done to us, rather than the fact that we're changing all the time and evolving all the time. Our hair is shedding and changing all the time. We're not in control of that. All sorts of, I'm not in control of pumping my blood around my body, thank God. I'd probably forget to do that quite a lot of the time. Whoops, I forgot to pump the blood around my body. Hang on. So we think of change as something that's being done to us. And so we've learned to fear change. Or when we find where we have to change because we have learning through pain. I am now in enough pain, I now have to change. So we think change is painful. And then we bring out the measuring stick that says success or failure. The reason this isn't working is because I'm not good enough, therefore I'm a failure. So we've got all these wonky things that we're doing. And then we think we can show up at our best just by putting loads of energy and attention there. We attach to fear of failure because we're afraid of change. And, I think one thing that this whole global pandemic has shown is that we've all had the ability to evolve far faster than we realized. And in the bigger organizations, the way that, people went to working at home, and, big industries that would never formally trust people to work at home, had to adapt super, super fast in some of those belief systems and mindsets. So I want a little fun experiment for you here now. So if you haven't got a pen and paper, just grab one quickly or write on your walls, something like that. I'm encouraging that. You can always paint over it. I want you to take a pen, and I want you to put the pen in your non-dominant hand, so the hand you don't ordinarily write in. And I know a lot of you probably don't write anymore anyway, but the hand, so if you're right-handed, pick up the pen in your left. And what I'd like you to do is then write your name with your non-dominant hand. Right.
Here I go, Becki, I'm going to do it.
Yeah, oh good, I'm glad that this is, honestly, it's quite a revealing experiment. So go for your full name, first name and surname. Sorry to any of those that double-barreled.
Oh, you're making it difficult now.
Warren, you've got a short name. Amy said, it looks like a 6-year-old has penned it. Yeah, me too. Fantastic. So as you started to do that, think about the process. Did you freeze for a moment? Did you suddenly think, oh, I can't do that? Did you think, hey, this is fun, I'll give this a go? Did you suddenly go, I'm not going to be able to do this? Oh, this is going to be rubbish. Did you avoid doing it completely because this sounds daft and stupid and pointless? So just observe now some of your thought processes that came up as soon as I invited you to do that exercise. What did it feel like for you? And who then has then looked at what they've written and judged themselves for it? Because whatever you've just been through in that exercise is a direct mirror of how you deal with change and behavioral change. Did you panic for a moment? How many have now done it a few times to try and get it better? So look at the judgment that came up. Look at how easy or difficult that you found that. Did you giggle at yourself and just find that really interesting to do it in a different way? Everything that came up for you is a direct mirror to how you deal with change. So look at what was working for you and look at what you were struggling with. It's very revealing, right? And thanks for the comments that are coming in. Yeah, there's anyone ambidextrous, anyone who's just like, yeah, I can use whichever side I want, Becki. So envious of those people. But again, you know, sometimes some of us have got hidden talents, and you know, who found that was easier than they thought it was going to be? Right. So different responses, which will show how you deal with behavioural change. So I mean, you can use that on your partners or some staff. Just get them to write that in a different hand and discuss what emotional experience that was for it, or what were the challenges, or how did they judge themselves from beginning to end. You know, maybe some people didn't want to share how they'd written it because they didn't feel it was good enough, and there's that measurement stick again. So I want you to just think about how that works for you, because behavioural change feels uncomfortable. And there is another little experiment you can do, and it's going to be a bit harder with wider arms, right? But I want everyone to just stick their arms out like this. I have still got hands. So stick their arms out like this. Oh, the joys of working on Zoom. And so what I want you to then do is clap and bring your hands together. So you've got your thumbs over each other. So let's just do that. 1, 2, 3, clap. Great. So now do that again. But this time I want you to swap the hands over. 1, 2, 3, and do it alternate. Right, now I've practiced this a bit. But how many people found that really difficult and your brain actually malfunctioned? So now do it again, still in the wonky way. Perhaps that was a little bit easier. Put your arms out again. Now do it again. Maybe that's just got a bit easier as your brain has got used to getting the message that we've done. We know how to do this. We just need to change the way we put the hands. And that's a bit like getting comfortable with change. Is sometimes we've got to repeat something just to get our neurology and our physical bodies used to doing something different. But it feels weird to begin with. And the mistake that we make is that if something doesn't feel right, it's wrong. Because that's not always the way. But we'll come more into instincts in a moment. So most of you think of resilience as, you know, for some of us, we think of resilience as getting on with it. You know, I talk to lots of very tough business people who, yeah, I'm really resilient, Becki. I just get on with it. So let's be quite clear that that is not resilience. Resilience isn't just getting on with it. In fact, getting on with it is a bit like burying things under the carpet. Now, if you're in an emergency crisis moment situation, then digging deep and getting on with it is sometimes what we need to do. But if you're using getting on with it as a long-term coping strategy, it's going to give you burnout. It's going to give you a multitude of health problems, mentally and physically. Because when we bury things under the carpet, we're actually in denial and disassociation about what the problem is, which means we tend to keep the same problem. We just get better at burying it or pretending that we're fine. Anyone relate to that? And I think, you know, I'm coming up to, what do we call it, a couple of years off 50. And certainly within my generation and my parents' generation, post-war, getting on with it was post-war exactly what we needed to do. The trouble is we've got stuck in that strategy and it's costing us dearly. So if you think getting on with it is a sign of resilience, this webinar is going to challenge you a little bit more to understand differently and more importantly to look at adopting some better habits for that. Because we can't separate our emotions. Our emotions are everything. And a business leader is only, a business and an organization is only as resilient as the business leader is, right? So if you're running a getting on with it strategy, it's going to be throughout your business. And it's going to give you a lot of blind spots that you're then not able to recognize. Emotions are everything, yet we become afraid of our emotions in business. We have a business persona, but we don't leave our emotions at home. We try to, and we bury them. But, you know, what are our customers buying? They're buying emotions in some way. They're buying people, we buy from people who we feel care about us. Even if we're just selling widgets that no one sees, if we feel that someone's got our interest, they've understood us, then we're more likely to buy from us. So emotions are everything. And the human spirit is relentless. But here's the good news. Every single one of you was born from resilience. You are already resilient, or you wouldn't be here. But every single one of you, you've had a 1 in 400 billion chance of you being you, of you uniquely being you. 1 in 400 billion. Now, I'm not a gambling person, but they ain't some great odds, are they? So what made you? You were just a cell with life force. No brain, no consciousness, no decision making, just pure resilience and life force. Now imagine if you could access still that level of life force, that level of resilience, because you are made of it. It's just that we've forgotten. Does anyone remember those blissful days of just being one cell, no conscious memory? Some people got stuck there. But you have just think about that now, 1 in 400 billion chance of you being you. So that resilience is in you, it's innate, and it's about reconnecting to what already is you. But the thing is, we're just too busy putting our energy into things that don't matter. Who's doing what on social media, who thinks what, judging ourselves to be successful, rather than feeling fulfilled in life. I don't know about you, but over the last year and a half, there's some definite clear things that have come to the forefront of me that really are important in my life, and the busyness of everything and saying yes to things had sort of eroded that, really. So I don't know if any of you can relate to that too. Right, so let's give you something to look at. Let's get some slides going. Right, so hopefully everyone can see that now. Thanks, Warren, for giving me control. So really, it's one thing to have resilience when everything's going well, but then really we find out about our level of resilience when we meet the challenges in life. And I'm no stranger to challenges. You don't become an expert in stress and anxiety just from reading books. I have had some interesting challenges in my life, which is also what makes resilience for me a very important subject. And I think one of the sort of big standout moments is I lost the ability to talk in my late teens and early 20s. I was in a nightclub and someone let off a CS gas canister, and for some reason it took me half an hour to get out of the building because fire exits were locked. Thank goodness it wasn't fire. And for one reason and another, my voice was damaged and I was unable to make sound. I lost my job selling in IT. Some saved is also, I was saved from IT. But it was a tough time, not being able to communicate in any way. But what it took me on recovery, with a lot of help from speech therapy and trying to build up my sound again, I had to learn to talk in a different way, is one of the greatest learnings that took me a few years to come to understand, is that my way, when I was silent, my way of staying connected to the world was to watch people having conversations. I'd be very sociable and out with my friends because that's where I get my energy from. And I would just watch everyone else talking, and I'd watch everyone else discussing things, and I would just listen. And I started to, when there's no pressure on you to be part of a conversation, to be right, to be wrong, be funny, debatable still, or to, fear of saying the wrong thing, all that pressure falls away. And what I started to observe, if you watch anything for 3 years intently, you start to learn a lot about it, right? And what I started to see, that there was conversations going on within people, and that every thought that somebody has shows somewhere in their body. It's either a change in skin texture, change in breath, change in pupils, all sorts of things move And there was this inner world that suddenly I was invited into, that I could see within people and see what their thoughts and feelings and how that was impacting their nervous system. And it was the university degree I could never have signed up for because it wasn't available. So now, when finally, I did discover what my purpose in life was, I suddenly realized how useful this skill was. And that, with a lot of training, has definitely made me part of what stands out differently in some of my abilities. I then, have become fascinated in helping people overcome suffering, massively, because I have been lucky enough to train in lots of things that can show that even if we can't change what's happening to someone, we can change how we're feeling and responding to it. And this also became paramount in my life when I was then diagnosed with melanoma, a deadly type of skin cancer, which I battled on and off for 9 years. And I watched myself go from somebody who would wake up in a panic in the middle of the night, from fast asleep to absolutely gasping for breath, panic at 3 a.m. every night, to somebody who then became so peaceful. Whilst waiting for some other biopsy results, I completely forgot I was getting results. And that really helped me to understand that by working at a deeper level, we really can change how we respond to things. So I walk what I talk. I work a lot with individuals, but I also go in and work with staff wellbeing, and my obviously, my resilience workshops too. But, I really like helping those who will then go on to help others too, not just making people richer and faster, as my earlier career working with athletes and financial traders was. So that's a little bit about me as to how I'm standing up here or sitting here in front of you all. And please feel free to visit my website. There's some really cool videos on there that show some of what's possible. There's also a great technique you can download, which can help build calm in your nervous system. And I invite you all to download that too. So let's get stuck into looking at your lives now too. So really, we could look at what resilience really means. It's about, do not judge me by my successes. We judge everyone by their successes, but really we should be looking and learning from people who fell down and got back up again. Because what is in the magic? What's the magic in those ingredients that means that they're able to get back up and not just get on with it, but actually recover and heal and then do better? That's what I've really become fascinated in. And I get to hear thousands and thousands of people's stories over the 14 years I've been working with people to change their lives. And I am so humbled by some of what I hear. It really is remarkable. And within all of us is some remarkable stories, but we don't take time to look at ourselves. So for most of us, what we're running is a survival strategy. Okay? And for many years, I thought I was thriving. I thought I was nailing it. I was smashing all my goals. I was in my second year of business when I got diagnosed with melanoma. And in that, all of you people with your own businesses, that first year is full on, right? Full on. And by the second year, I was hitting all my goals. I was absolutely blown away. I was starting to do expert slots on the media. I was on Sky News. I was all over the place. I was thinking, can life get any better? And then I got diagnosed with cancer, which, when you're running the worst business model known to man, which is selling your time for money, at least I know it's the worst business model, whereas back then I didn't. Praise you all who are selling products and earn money while you sleep. Smart. But, actually, back then I was running a survival strategy. And you're running a survival strategy, either in your life or in your business, because you're always waiting for the next quarter, or when we get through this month, or when we get through this week, or when we get through next year. There's always a next place to get to. That's when you're running a survival mentality. It's sort of like, we made it here, right, let's get through the next bit. And the trouble with the survival mentality is it's very stressful. and you're creating lots of cortisol in your body, lots of adrenaline. A lot of entrepreneurs actually get off on that adrenaline. It's a bit like a form of addiction. They're on a high for that first year and a half, but then they crash. And there's always a bit of a crash that happens towards the end of year 2 or coming up on that last trajectory, where burnout seems to happen a bit more. And that's when we stop celebrating the successes, and we're more focused on what isn't working as a way to try and perfect something and find this happy place where life is problem-free, right? And remember that this is the wrong strategy. So if you're waiting for life to be problem-free and then you're happy and life's great, this is setting yourself up for failure. What we've really got to do is take ourselves and upgrade all of our lives, our relationships, our health, our wealth, our businesses, so we're in balance, from surviving, just getting through. Remember, survival is a short-term coping mechanism. If we're using it on the long term, we're going to be causing ourselves problems. And also with our staff, if as business leaders, we're running a survival mentality, and then we're going to project that at our staff. We're going to expect them to be really reactive. We're going to be putting a lot of stress on them because we'll be changing our minds from our reactive decision making, and we'll be stressing people out beneath us as well, and maybe in our personal life. So think about now, where in your life is running a survival strategy? Because resilience is what takes you into thriving. Not getting on with it. Getting on with it doesn't take you to thriving. Getting on with it keeps you in survival, because you're not actually addressing the core problems. You're just getting better at withstanding them until you can't, or until more and more comes on your shoulders and then you can't. So think about where in your life you're just surviving right now. Where in your life you're developing resilience, and understand that there's another place to get to called thriving. And remember that thriving isn't when life is challenge-free. Thriving is when you're getting the challenges and you're remaining resourceful, you're keeping your self-care high, and you are perhaps taking help, and you are looking at your energy levels and the ecology of the world around you. That's when you're thriving. It isn't just life is fantastic. And that's the mentality we've really got to start challenging, not just in ourselves, but in our loved ones too. So resilience really is our ability to bounce back from adversity. No adversity, no resilience. And perhaps we know those people, there are people that have just had very little challenges in their life. And sometimes, sometimes they can't cope with some of what somebody who's had a lot of challenges in their life might look at as being simple things. So really, that is the backbone of our resilience. Yet we're deeply ashamed of our adverse moments because they come with vulnerability. And vulnerability equals shame and weakness, particularly in our tough chaps, because you've been conditioned like that since birth. So we need to start really talking more about our adversities, because that's how we teach the next generation. Our generation taught, the generation above me taught me to just get on with it. Now our younger generation are smarter enough to not just get on with it because they've seen where that gets us, but they don't have the resilience, or they're not building the resilience because they think that life has, happiness is a condition of life being problem-free. So I want you to think now about your own life. So how resilient do you feel you are in your life? And I want you to score yourself now, 10 being high, yeah, Becki, I'm really resilient, and 0, not at all. So just give yourself a score, ideally writing it down. I'm a fan of that pen and paper. 10 being high, 0 being low. And then give yourself a score for your business or your job. So 10 being high, 0 being low. And for anyone scoring themselves on what they feel is the lower side, I want you to just watch that you don't get into a negative narrative with that. Oh, look at me, I'm only a 4. I bet so-and-so's higher. Yeah, see, 4. See, nothing works for me. Doesn't matter what effort I put in. Look, I'm just not strong. Remind yourself you're born of resilience, every single one of you. So just make sure you don't get into a negative story if you do score yourself lower. And as we go on to the next exercise, that's going to become even more prevalent. Just know, that's interesting. I'm a 4 or a 6, or go me, I'm an 8, 9, 10. And obviously, that can fluctuate, especially on a Monday morning. So you should have all scored yourself of how resilient you feel you are in your life and in your job. Nice one. So let's just whiz through some effective behaviors. Some of the core building blocks that I believe it takes to have resilience. And there's some others I want to add on to this. And I think purpose. Purpose is a really effective behavior. And for many people, they're quite troubled that they don't feel that they've got a sense of purpose. Or they're working really, really hard and they don't feel that they're making a difference. And yet they didn't really realize that that was, really integral to their core values. So for me, I'm very much driven by the core value of making a difference. So much so that in the past, it's cost me my health. And obviously I had to get some reminders on that actually I'm quite limited in how I can make a difference without my health. And so I had to learn to prioritize my self-care so that I can fulfill my purpose. And it's okay as well if you're not 100% clear on your purpose, because it will fluctuate. Sometimes we're not supposed to know what our full purpose is. We're just supposed to know what the next stepping stone looks like. Because for some of us, if we really knew what our full purpose was, we'd be a bit terrified of it. But life is going to help us develop along the way to become the person that won't be terrified by it. And purpose doesn't have to be something that can be recognized with an MBE or outwardly celebrated by other people. As Warren brought in, if you're being deeply impacted by grief and you are showing up to help other people or to be kind to other people, even in your own pain, sometimes that's the purpose. We can never really fully understand the impact that we have on others and the tapestry that interweaves us all. We can never really understand the important role that we play in another's life. And sometimes it's not the big gestures that we might think. It's the person we smiled at that morning that we didn't even know. So purpose is a really important, effective behavior, as well as determination. Life does just, once we feel clear about what we want to achieve in life just doesn't go, there you go, there's all the doors open. No, it gives us challenges, and it gives us challenges to make sure we're going to have the ability to thrive. It's not because it's trying to punish us. Oh, Becki, you're a bad person, you can have cancer again. No, it was, Becki, you're still not prioritizing your well-being. You need to learn to really take care of yourself and to stop putting in meetings when I just got off an operating table, which I actually did, even knowing what I knew. Luckily, the person whose meeting I was trying to put in, I actually said, I'll tell you what, I'll drop your line when I get off the operating table and maybe we can still have that meeting. And they were like, no, let's not, let's reschedule for another day. And it was only then I realized the madness of what I was doing. I wouldn't recommend that. But one of the big foundations is trusting ourselves and trusting others. So I want you to score yourself now, 10 being high, 0 being low, on how you trust others. So I totally trust others, 10, not at all, 0. But also, do you trust yourself? And part of trusting yourself is trusting your instincts. Right. So who totally trusts their instincts? Who listens to their instincts, first of all? Because we've got to break this down. Do you listen to your instincts? Do you then trust your instincts? And then do you take action on your instincts? Right? there's a big relationship between our mental health and our relationship with our instincts. The poorest, most unwell people have the most fragmented relationship with their instincts. They either I have really strong instincts, but I do not trust them at all, or they've disconnected totally from their sense of self and their sense of instincts and their ability to trust themselves. And this is really, really important. And it's a fascinating subject for me. And I've written a book, which I'm just working to get published now. And it's about how feeling safe in the world has a direct impact on our mental health. And as part of this, I went and interviewed loads of special forces, SBS, SAS, and also firefighters and extreme wave riders in Hawaii, which I did on the phone, unfortunately. It's probably tax deductible, that one, I reckon. I should have made it to Hawaii, maybe a follow-up interview. But it was fascinating to talk to these individuals to understand how they thrive while under threat, because a lot of what they do, I'd be gone. You know, my fight, flight, freeze would have kicked off, and yeah, I wouldn't be resourceful in a lot of those situations. So what is it about them that makes them able to be in absolute acute danger and thrive? Anyway, instincts. Some of the lads that I spoke to from the military, they came up with this incredible story. And they were out on a mission in the desert in Afghanistan in the dead of night. And they all were just feeling uneasy, and they discussed, hang on, something doesn't feel right. Now, these are tough guys who have learned to disconnect from their emotions on lots of levels, enabled, you know, to enable them to do some of the work that they do. And here they were, all sort of discussing through the odd words in the dead of night, in the desert, something doesn't feel right. And they all agreed that something didn't feel right. So they called their RAF to come in with air cover. So they came in with the fast jets, which have got thermal imaging cameras on them. And they scanned the desert around and reported that all was clear. There was nothing out there that the thermal imaging cameras had picked up. As it happens, the weather took a turn for the worse, and a big sandstorm whipped up. So they were pulled off the mission and returned back to base. The next day, they went out on the same mission in daylight. And that's when they came across the dugouts. The Taliban had been buried under the desert, and they were about to walk into an ambush. How did their instincts know that? Now, their instincts, despite the fact that the technology from above came back with evidence that all was clear, it didn't appease their instincts. So think about that now. Think about in your life where you go, I just knew I shouldn't have done that, or I knew I should have done that, or I knew I should have gone for that opportunity, or I knew I shouldn't have trusted that person. I knew I shouldn't have married that person. So, but quite often we're using our instincts to look for things that don't feel right, rather than, there's a whole spectrum here of instincts. We can look at what does feel right and follow that. And that comes back to learning through, you know, joy rather than pain. So we can use our instincts to feel what foods we want to eat. We can use our instincts to feel about our lives. And sometimes our instincts can feel like change is coming. I don't know if any of you can relate to that. We feel like change is coming, and then we're afraid of it. And actually the change comes, and it's the best kind of change. So think about your relationship with your instincts, because that's a massive part of your resilience, is learning to trust yourself. And again, for me, with one of my, again, with melanoma, I saw something on my body and I was just like, that's not right. And it was a small red dot that had just appeared. I was like, that's not right. And that's not right for my skin. And I went to my consultant and I said, look, this isn't right. My body was like, get it out, get it out. It wasn't saying this is cancer, Becki. It was just going, get it out. And my consultant looked at it in the ways that they examine these things, and he was like, no, it's fine. And I was just like, it's not, get it out. In the end, they took it out. And it turns out to be melanoma again, but thankfully caught really early because I trusted my instinct over the evidence of my consultant. And now, you know, my team at Poor Hospital, they, you know, I just say I've got a problem and they have me straight in, they don't even question. So think about your instincts. Think about what your instincts are telling you. The problem is we can confuse our instincts for fear. Fear is very good at masquerading as instincts. Here's how you tell the difference. You know it's different when your instincts won't argue with you, your instincts won't give you options, your instincts won't have a conversation with you. Your instincts will just go, that feels right, that doesn't feel right. Do it, don't do it. Sometimes it's a timing thing as well. Sometimes we've got to wait for the right time for our instincts to go, that, do that, sign that, go for that. So thinking, and we've just got to, but the more you listen to yourself, the more you can tell the difference between what is fear and what are instincts. Okay. So that brings us on to self-belief. Self-belief is also a really important building block of foundations of effective behaviors that then contribute to your resilience levels. You know, we've got to believe in ourselves in a world that is trying to disempower us to not believe in ourselves. You know, look at all the industries that would go out of business if we suddenly had self-worth. If we felt good enough just the way we were. Think about all the industries that would go out, right? So it's very hard to develop that self-belief in a world that has told you you're not good enough. And also then we tell ourselves we're not good enough with this success and failure measuring stick that we all have. So think now about how much you believe in yourself, 10 being high, 0 being low. And obviously some of self-belief comes from actually doing it. You know, when we're beginners at something, we might not have the belief that then creates the confidence because we're still new at something and we don't allow ourselves to be new at something. So we start beating ourselves up because it feels vulnerable. And then we diminish our self-belief and our self-confidence, which stops us trying new things again. It's a bit of a trap, right? So think about your self-belief. You know, in some areas of, you know, of my life, I've got strong self-belief. In others, the kitchen, not some great self-beliefs. You know, but I'm working on those and I've challenged those. I'm challenge myself not to burn everything I put in the oven. So give yourself a score on that, and then that comes to optimism. And optimism isn't standing in your garden saying there are no weeds when you're clearly up to your neck in weeds. That's delusion and that's denial. Optimism is feeling optimistic about something in the future. Yeah, it might be really tough right now, and you might have some big challenges. You might have loved ones that are unwell, but we can remain optimistic and hopeful about the future, or hopeful about making the most of the time with people if someone's really unwell. So think about that optimism, particularly from a leadership point of view. You know, we cannot say a word, but your body language will show belief and optimism, and people will follow and trust that. And it's really hard when you have your own business, it's really hard to keep that optimism genuine and authentically have it, because it can be quite lonely in leadership, can't it? There's no one to share the problems with, and you have to show up with, your game performance for everyone around you. So, I mean, I work a lot with clients to help them rebuild that where that optimism is burnt out. But think about how optimistic you are. Do you look at what you can do, or do you look at what you can't do and what's going wrong? And effective communication as well. So how well do you communicate? 10 being high, 0 really low. And I'll give you a little throwaway on that too. You can know it all, but if you can't communicate it well, it'll get lost and you'll become frustrated. So here's something you might find interesting to know. The brain or the mind doesn't understand the word don't. Right. So it deletes it. So when we give someone an instruction like don't worry, the brain will delete the word don't, and actually what you've asked someone to do is worry. You know, I don't know if any of you can relate to that. Perhaps you've been not worried about something at all, and someone said to you, hey, don't worry, and you're like, should I be worried? And until that point, you hadn't even considered, you know, you were carefree about the situation. Toddlers get this. Don't touch the plug socket. Look what they've just gone and done. Touch the plug socket. Well, actually, you've told them to don't touch the plug socket. Socket is an instruction to touch the plug socket. So think about your messaging, where you may be focusing on what you don't want someone to do instead of guiding them towards what you do want them to do. And you know, that goes to your written messaging as much as your spoken messaging. And some of us may communicate really well at work, and then we get home, don't we? And it all goes out the window, and we don't necessarily communicate effectively. We don't discuss what's important to us. We don't listen to other people because we've done it all day. So, you know, look at the areas of your life that are perhaps more challenging and look at how well you're communicating in those areas. We expect people to be mind readers as well, don't we? Now, obviously, I am a bit of a mind reader, which comes with another set of issues. But, you know, we do expect people, we make a lot of assumptions and we expect people to mind read. And that brings us then on to praise and recognition. So, how good are you at giving praise and recognition? And you know what, for many people in corporates, particularly in the C-suite, in organizations, I find that this is what they're the most uncomfortable with, is actually giving authentic praise and recognition, because it makes them feel vulnerable, because you've got to give it from the heart, right? You can't give praise from the mind. It doesn't reach your feeling system. So giving authentic praise and recognition means we've got to connect with our hearts. And that makes us feel vulnerable. So we don't do it. And some of you are thinking, yeah, I'm really good at praise and recognition. How good are you at receiving it? Right. Oh, no, this old thing. Oh, no, I'm not very good at that. You know, we reject the praise and recognition that comes to us. Yet, the praise and recognition is energy. It's someone giving us energy, and it helps build our self-confidence. It helps, especially when we're in a beginner at something. We need that feedback to tell us that what we're doing is working, and to stop us going to our heads and our measuring sticks and judging ourselves as a success or a failure. So, you know, that one's really important as well. And as is asking for help. Wasn't so good at that. That was used to be a real struggle for me, is asking for help. Because for me, in the past, asking for help was only something you did when you were on your knees. Like, I now cannot lift my head up off the pavement. I now need some help, please. Could somebody help me? But that's not the kind of asking for help I'm talking about. The kind of asking for help is culturally. It's that you build collaboration and trust through having cultures that ask for help. Hey, could you help me with this? It doesn't mean I can't do it, but I need some help with this. And it's a good opportunity to invite some coaching as well within your companies. But having a culture where anyone can ask for help builds trust and collaboration, and starts to build a culture that we can trust feedback too, which helps us to learn better and challenge ourselves more. So think about how you are asking for help. 10 being high, 0 being low. A bit confronting, that one, isn't it? This brings us to our ineffective behaviors. Now, anger is always one that has a bit of controversial, sometimes a bit of a discussion happens around anger, because quite a few, particularly business owners, have gone, but I was angry. It was anger that made me set up my business. I was angry at my old boss, so I went and set up my business. Anger in the short term is healthy. I have as many clients that I need to help release anger as I do clients that need to learn to express anger, because they just sit there, it's fine, It's fine that you've just stolen my car and my house and my database. It's absolutely fine. You know, that's not healthy either. That's really suppressed emotions. But anger, the actual chemical of anger takes 90 seconds to flash through our body. 90 seconds. So if you allow that 90 seconds to happen, then you're not then acting in anger. Or you're not driven by that chemical of anger. And that chemical driver of anger numbs loss. You can't feel angry and loss at the same time, which is why a lot of really perpetually angry people are actually grieving for something and they don't know. You know, they'll be totally unaware of this. Anger can, in its useful way, anger can tell us that somebody has violated a value of us or a boundary that's important to us. The chances are we probably haven't communicated what's important to us. We've just expected them to guess. So anger needs some more investigation. Okay, what is it that I'm angry at? And what is it that this is trying to tell me? And what and who do I need to communicate to? And then you can start to use anger as a guide, but not use it to communicate. You know, for a lot of people, you know, they wait to break up with a relationship or walk out of a job when they're angry, because in that moment of being angry, they're now not afraid of the loss. But when emotions are high, intelligence is low, right? And that goes the same for excitement. Which brings us to, it's obviously denial, pretending it's not happening. I think we've covered that a little bit. And that's similar to, you know, denial, let's not open the envelopes, let's not look at our profit and loss properly, let's not know the numbers of our business, let's not understand that our relationships are falling apart, and yet we're doing nothing to try and bring them back and into alignment, which is pretending it's not happening. Again, in the long term, that's really not helpful. As is avoidance. I was a cracking avoider. Unfortunately, it keeps the problems, because by avoiding doesn't really sort out the problems, does it? Now, I'm quite a fan though of a too hard for now draw. And a too hard for now draw, you can have metaphorically in your head, or you can have a physical too hard for now tray or drawer or whatever, or folder on your computer. The difference between avoiding something and a too hard for now moment is this. If you avoid something, you just put it out of your mind. I'm just going to avoid that. I'm not going to make that phone call. I'm going to avoid that phone call. I'm going to avoid going to my mother-in-law. I'm going to avoid doing X, Y, Z. A too hard for now drawer, you say, okay, that's too hard for now, but I'm going to put it in that drawer and I'm going to come back to it on Tuesday at 9 o'clock. So you set a time and a date of when you're going to return to that problem. And in somewhere in that time period, perhaps you've gained better resources or a better state to then relook at the problem. It's a really handy tool there. So look at where you're avoiding things in your life. And what about blame? It's your fault. No, it's your fault. No, it's your fault. No, it's your fault. Some of us go into attack when someone blames us for something. Straight away we defend ourselves, even though we know we did maybe make a mistake. But blame doesn't help us get anywhere. It doesn't help us learn from our mistakes. So try and come out of blame and instead look at having better communication about, okay, what's the problem here? Because there will always be something for everyone to understand and learn from. Which brings us on to not asking for help, which is the opposite of asking for help. Self-delusion, standing in the garden, there are no weeds. And self-doubt. Self-doubt is a crippler, absolute crippler. And self-doubt and self-criticism, it's that critical voice in our head often. And often it is a voice or a feeling. And it says that there's danger attached, or failure, really. There's a potential of failure and therefore rejection in something that we're about to do. So many businesses never get off the ground because of self-doubt. And that self-doubt leads someone to sabotage so that they don't even send the email or set up the insurance or do the simple things. so that they will never fail because they don't get going in the first place. And these voices of self-doubt are really meddling. And here's how I spend a lot of my time evicting self-doubt voices. And they've often been installed by a critical parent or a teacher or something like that. And here's one way you can get rid of them. Interested in one way? Whenever that voice kicks up, because it will serve no useful purpose, even though we think it does, you tell it, I approve of myself. Just, I approve of myself. It might get gobby back. No, you don't, Becki. There was that time where you did that talk and nobody was listening. I approve of myself. And you just keep answering it back, I approve of myself. And what you will find, never been wrong, what you will find is that voice will back off and shut up because you're showing it you're in charge and it won't like it. So try that. It sounds so simple, and yet self-doubt is behind depression, it's behind anxiety, not exclusively, but it's behind so much suffering is these self-doubt and these voices that keep us small. So give yourself a score on that. But let's now look at how you personally respond to challenge, right? Because we all have a way that we respond to challenge. And yes, our fight, flight, freeze and submit and flop, they're the more trauma responses, but we'll stick with fight, flight and freeze, are natural responses to challenge. But they produce these behaviors, and I wonder which ones you identify with. Type 1 person, that's not an actual type of person, but I'm just going to refer to it as type 1, will disconnect. So here's the problem, and they'll disconnect from the problem, create lots of solutions. They're the people that instantly will talk about a fix. You know what you want to do is blah, 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 blah. Or you want to do blah, 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 blah. Now, of course, if they're experienced in that area that you've got the problem with, let's say they're an expert, then of course they might have the fix because they do understand the problem. And a lot of people in big organizations are very monetarily rewarded for coming up with lots of solutions. NHS is an example of that, right? Here we are coming up with some solutions, but no one's fixing the bottom line of all the waste, right? So the fixers disconnect from the problem, and they instantly, it feels uncomfortable to be in the problem. They'll escape the feeling of uncomfortable by feeling resourceful and coming up with lots of fixes. There's pros and cons in that, right? From a leadership point of view, these people can look very effective in a challenge. But type 2 people instantly get stressed. Oh my God, here's a problem, here's a challenge. And they'll get more and more and more and more stressed until they're in enough pain to then take some action and do something about it. The type 2 people very much know what the problem is. Very much know what the problem is. They're living, eating, sleeping, breathing the problem. But they're not quite sure how to get resourceful because they've forgotten they're built from resilience, right? They may be afraid of confrontation. There may be some deeper fears underneath that are stopping them from being able to be resourceful. Also, the type 1 disconnect people will look at type 2 who are being all stressed and feel like they can't rely on them, instead of actually understanding that those people getting really stressed probably are more geared up to understand what the problem is. It's just uncomfortable to hear. But by far, the most effective way when you're dealing with challenges is to create more options. So keep creating options. So now some of you are now thinking, well, I do that. Well, as soon as there's a challenge, I think, what can I do? And I start creating options. But here's where we get stuck. We get stuck. Whoops. Because we only create 2 options, right? Stay or go. Am I going to leave my job or I'm going to stay in my job? Am I going to get rid of that customer or am I going to keep that customer? Am I going to take that deal or am I going to reject that deal? Am I going to hire that person or am I not going to hire that person? And actually nothing feels quite right. This is where our instincts kick in. We get kind of stuck on 2 options. It's like the success-fail thing all over again. And then we try and concertina and squeeze ourselves into what seems like the better option of the 2, don't we? Do I get divorced or stay in the relationship? You know, everywhere I look, I see people trying to stick themselves in one of two options, when actually what we need to do is create more options. But in order to do that, we've got to get creative. And when we're faced with a challenge, we're not feeling resourceful, and then we can't get creative. Like the creative area of our brain, our right hemisphere of our brain, it just doesn't operate when we're stressed in the same way. So the first thing we need to do is change our emotional state and get more resourceful and sit back and create options. So which one do you think you are? Are you more type 1, get more stress, create options? You know what you want to do, you want to fix this? Or are you the person that gets more stressed? Or are you somebody, the unicorn, who magically goes into this resourceful state and starts to create more options? And maybe you're like that at work, but what are you like at home? Perhaps you can map that over. So think about how you respond to challenge. So now I'd like you to think about your current challenge that you have in life. And I want you to write down what that challenge is. And it can be health, wealth, business, financial. It could be about something you want to stop doing. Maybe you want to stop smoking or drinking so much, or whatever it is. Think about your current challenge in life. I want you to identify a challenge. That's right. And then I want you to start to come up with some options. And, you know, for the sake of just not having blank space in this webinar, I encourage you to come back to that and really spend some time creating some options to help you solve that challenge. And it's a brainstorming exercise. If dancing a chicken soup comes to mind, write it down. Make sure that you do not get that measuring stick out and go, well, that's a stupid idea, because behind that idea might be another idea. So we need to just brainstorm and keep writing down ideas. Now, when we do this with the peer networks, we actually go through and we create some of these options. With my clients, I get them to create 20. And I actually have a dedicated book at home, which is 20 ideas to help me overcome X, Y, Z. And the first thing I do is I start writing ideas. And sure, I might get to 12 and I have a blank spot. And if you get a blank spot, what it means is you've reached the edge of what you already know. And again, school has kind of taught us to just like meet a blank spot and try and fudge it, or just get on with something else. But what you've got to start to learn to do is read that blank spot as reaching an end of a boundary, and then you push your mind past that boundary into what it didn't know it knew. And you will always find many more answers. And it's in getting into this blue sky thinking that the magic will come with whatever challenge you're facing. So can I invite you after this webinar to actually sit down, make some time, because that's the other thing we don't do. We don't make time to look at ourselves. But yet that's how we understand our resilience and get our self-confidence from that. And to start to create options for those. So, sorry, let's just go back to that. Now I'd just like to think about reminding you that you're already born and built from resilience. So I want you to think of a challenge that you've already overcome in your life. And again, it doesn't have to be recent, it can be a long time ago. Think of a challenge that you've already overcome in your life. And again, it can be any area, you don't have to stick to business because we're not separate. You know, what our weaknesses in our behavior will show up in our businesses. I only have to look at someone's desk and it tells me everything that's going on in their head. How glad are you that cameras aren't on today? That's normally when people switch their cameras off. But think of a challenge that you have already overcome. Okay? And I just want you to take a note of what that challenge was and how did you overcome it? What are some of the resources that you used or learn about yourself in overcoming that challenge? I'm just going to take a minute just to write that down. And if you're not writing something down, just give it some thought. You know, that minute is really valuable. Well, I have a little sip of something. So what challenge have you already overcome? Think about that. And how did you overcome it? What did you learn about yourself? Just take some notes down. So if I think, you know, some of the things, challenges that I've overcome, if we go to blame on those, oh, I knew I should have done that, then we're not really learning from it. Because all of these challenges have what I would call buried treasure within them. Every challenge that comes our way, even the most heartbreaking challenges that we face sometimes and decisions, contain with them a great learning. That when we get that learning and we really understand that learning and we take it on board, our life changes. So if I think back to business with me, I think one of the greatest learnings that I got from those early few years was actually to relax more. You know, I was so busy driving, I've got to be a success, got to be a success, got to eat as well. You know, it's, you sometimes, the cost of relaxing, you know, cost of fun goes out of your life when you're not relaxed. And I wasn't being able to be relaxed because I wasn't being able to trust myself enough, because I was a beginner at having a business. And I probably gave myself way too much of a hard time. Anyone else relate to that? So one of the learnings that I got was to trust. And if I can't trust myself sometimes because I'm not experienced, maybe I can find a mentor that will help me to trust myself. You know, surround yourself by great mentors, particularly if you're undertaking something new. And that comes down to asking for help, right? And then feeling that we're a failure if we ask for help. No, 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 no. Find someone who's doing something well and model it. That's how we learn. Because what we've got to start collecting from our challenges is what the learnings were. What are the learnings? What did I learn about that? And I just want to show the difference between a learning and a emotional contract. An emotional contract is something that makes your life smaller. For example, many of us got our heart broken in our early years. And some of you were the heartbreakers. Yeah, you never knew what it felt like. But some of us had our heart broken in the early years. And for some people, they made an emotional contract, which sort of is a personal moment where you make a declaration like something like, I am never going to love again. I am never going to let anyone close to me again. That's an emotional contract that makes your life smaller. It is not a learning in the context that I mean it today. So I want you to look for the learnings. And if you start to look whenever a challenge comes your way, yippee, here comes the challenge, even if it's a heartbreaking challenge. And just know that there is something in there for you to truly learn about yourself. And if you take that learning and look for the learning rather than the pain, that's when magnificent resilience starts to build. And then what happens is it seems that your life challenges lessen. They don't. It's just the impact they have on you is less. Because you know you're resourceful, because you've remembered that you're built from 100% resilience. And your mind, body, and spirit is recalling that. And you've got all of this data around you of all the learnings from your life to stand upon and support you as you go through those challenges. And that is where the ingredients of resilience comes from. And obviously today we've only just been able to sort of bring you into it's such a big subject. I could have you all for a week. There's some great ways that you can start to change how you feel, learning some great breathing techniques, for example. And I think as a part of the business festival, there is later on this week a breathwork Zoom session. And I highly recommend that for anybody who needs to start to learn how to change their state. But so, you know, there is so much to learn about how to show up and face challenges in a healthy way. So this is just the beginning, and I hope today that's got you thinking. And thank you for staying with me on this all the way through. I know for some of you it may have been challenging, and for others you've been really excited by it. And you know, and I'm really happy to take any questions or share any insights that you've got from that. You know, you've got me here for the next few minutes, and you know, I can certainly, and I'm very approachable too. So if anyone's got questions they want to contact me, then just put my name into Google and you can contact me. All my details are on there, Becki Houlston. So thank you very much for spending your morning with me.
Perfect. Thank you, Becki. Round of applause. Passionate, energetic, and full of expertise as ever. I mean, you know, we've worked together, and obviously you've been delivering, you know, this subject matter resilience as part of our peer networks as we developed, a workbook as well for Evolve. But I always, you know, hear and listen to what you say, and I need some reminders from time to time. So some of my takeaways today, well, anybody that's got any questions, please do add them. Is to be happy, I need to be problem free, because I think we do all think that sometimes, and I think that was a reminder. You don't, you know, to be happy, you won't be or don't need to be problem free. Getting on with it is not resilience, a famous trait of mine, I think, one that I kind of creep into every now and then. Let's just get on with it and be fine. But that isn't resilience. You know, that importance of self-care as being a big part of resilience.
Yeah.
The communication trait of not using, you know, don't use the word don't. So don't use the word don't. I said it then. Celebrate successes. I don't think we often do enough of that in life, particularly in business. And that idea of creating options, which I know is one of your favourites, and some of the things you've done in the workshops is, you know, we all think of 2 options and then we pick one, but you know, don't stop until you get to 20. I've heard you say before.
Oh, always. Yeah, always. And then what happens is the more you do it as an exercise, when you find yourself in challenge, your mind our mind automatically starts getting resourceful, and that's when you don't panic then. So whatever challenge comes your way, your nervous system automatically becomes resourceful, which is exactly what you want to be.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, I don't think we've got any questions. We've gotten some lovely comments in the chat. Thanking you for the fantastic
Thanks, Amy. Thanks a few Amy's and Claire's and Badge and Susan and Alina. Thank you so much as well for giving me your time today.
Cool. We do have a question that's popped up as we said that. So it's from Jack. Hi, Becki. Great talk. Thank you. I found it really interesting. I've recently discovered, I always get this word, Stoic philosophy, and found it really useful. I wondered if it has formed part of your research.
Sorry, what was that? The something philosophy, did you say?
Being Stoic, S-T-O-I-C.
I think, I mean, I haven't. I mean, I love the words of people who've got good stories to tell, and obviously a lot of philosophy comes from that. And I think that there's some very wise people who can teach us well. So I think being open to learning from people, other people and other people's stories is always, you know, wisdom. What's the difference between knowledge and wisdom? You know, knowledge is knowing that tomatoes are fruit, and wisdom's knowing not to put it in a fruit salad, right? So yeah, I think philosophy is a great way to learn emotional language, but I think it's important to not be passive in that. You know, there's a lot of people who can give a lot of philosophy, but they're not actually making it into actions. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Okay, I think it does. We assume it does. Yeah. So hopefully everybody, I mean, there's clearly a lot of kindness and comments coming to you, Becki, and as well deserved. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for everybody for sitting on the webinar. It's clear you've taken something away from it that's great, but all I would say is take it away and do something. You know, Becki, you set the challenge of thinking about one of your current challenges and coming up with options to do that. But, you know, if you've taken away something else, maybe it is the importance of self-care or celebrating successes. Just as a result of attending the webinar today, please go away and do at least one thing. That will make a difference. You know, sometimes we come to all of these things and we try and take everything away with us, but actually sometimes just taking one or two things and making that happen can make a difference. Got to thank the BCP Council for their support and belief in Evolve, for providing the support, such that, you know, these webinars and all the events that are part of the festival can be free. So if you haven't yet and you want to register for the final events that take part this week, please go to evolvemembers.com. We've got some sponsors in Inspired Business and Tax Advisors, and also the Bournemouth Echo as a media partner. But really, the thanks is to everybody that has attended this morning to take your time out for what is such an important subject, and it isn't talked about enough. We do have the Evolve to Succeed podcast. And Becki, you've been a guest twice on the podcast. The very early episode talking about stress, but also as we came into the kind of pandemic, we recorded an episode. So if you go to the Evolve to Succeed podcast, you can hear more Becki there. That's it really for me. That's it from the webinar. Remember to look at the leaders community and all sorts of other things available at evolvemembers.com. But other than that, Becki, thank you once again.
Thank you. Thanks everyone. It's lovely to see some familiar names as well coming up on the chat comment, and I wish you all well, and it's lovely to connect with you again.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Have a lovely Monday.
Bye.